So hey, so that's Klaus is actually on vacation, so it's just going to be um the a few things I wanted to Vinnie, walk you through, kind of update on the state of where we are. There are a few things I wanted to cover today, and obviously super interactive. Want to get your feedback as well on this. Quickly touch on TA acquisition. Although since we met, we talked a little bit about this. Kind of recap the vision for ERPx, the product, as I said, that it's been in the work for a long time, and it's now finally, here, right now. Sort of a quick update on the state of customers with ERPx, specifically, how many, who they are, how we think about them, and so on. And then, just a little bit of time on how we're thinking about migrations, over time, or for the existing customer base, because obviously that is a transitioning to sort of a new platform and so on. Hopefully the agenda makes sense, and I could dive into this, or if you have sort of additional things you want to cover, we'll cover them.
I'm glad you're going to talk about the last item, because a lot of ERP vendors have next generation products, but the migration has been awfully slow, right? So I'm glad you're thinking about it, hopefully automating as much as you can of it and so on. So look forward to this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good agenda.
All right, sounds good. Let's dive into this. So first of all, it's a TA acquisition. Obviously it's been a week or so. We are sort of in the process of being acquired. There's sort of agreement in place. It hasn't closed yet, but so we're progressing. Hopefully it's going to happen pretty soon. And the main sort of rationale there is sort of growth. Ultimately, when it's sort of a next phase for us, it's a partner that will invest sort of in people, product, customers, help us with sort of the new set of stuff that we've been working on and bringing to market, in terms of ERPx, but also expanding into different countries, becoming much more of a global business. The partner, as we went through this process, that we felt very good about, we felt like we have a pretty, very good fit in terms of their expertise in the space. They're very sort of software-oriented, investor, and, interested in long-term growth. And, we're excited about what we could do together and sort of the next iteration of our journey, that we'll be able to take with them.
They also seem to be very savvy about the services economy, right? I guess they have IFS in the portfolio and a couple of others. So a lot of investors don't understand services quite that well. So,
and technology too. I mean, if you look at, I was actually, I've known them, about them for a while. Obviously they existed for for many years, but just kind of in the part of the process, when you go on their website and look at the portfolio, it's it's quite impressive in terms of sort of technology enabled, things, services in the sort of technology space. They have quite a bit of pattern recognition. They've been around through different facets, low end, high end, mid market, North America, Europe, technology plus service. There's all these variations of different things, for enterprise or for consumers or whatever. And so they've seen a lot of different angles, they've seen a lot of different patterns, and we're very, very excited that they can help us sort of see around the corner a little bit on some of these things that we may not have external expertise, in, and just help us sort of navigate our next phase. So let's talk about generally the kind of where we are. And obviously you're very familiar with the company, so I'm going to go through some of these things pretty quickly. But the origins of the company, kind of origins of the products. They're built sort of the way those things were built back in the day, in sort of original incarnation. Very flexible, functionally rich, but sort of monolithic, self-contained, on-premise, and essentially sort of, it was like a toolbox. You could do anything you want with, but you have to know what you want, and you have to actually do it. So whether through, professional services yourself, but there was this whole process of, taking the toolbox and sort of configuring it or customizing it or implementing it, whatever the terms that you use to make it, fit what you want it to be. With sort of a first generation cloud, we started to change that. First of all, obviously, we started delivering this in, as a cloud product, where you didn't have to think about data centers and hardware and, and administration, all that kind of stuff. But, and we sort of took it from them. We also sort of started evolving kind of how we approach the notion of a fit, the industry functionality. We came up with this idea of industry models, which is, essentially, hundreds of thousands of configurations, where we really go holistically through the whole product footprint and think about, the fit for particular industries and sort of implement this so that as they enter the implementation phase, all those decisions are already sort of made for them with high degree of a fit. But the exciting thing, and the thing we've been working on now for a whole bunch of years, 5 years or so, is ERPx, which is sort of a next sort of iteration of of what we can do. And you're familiar with this, and obviously it's a very different product in many different in many different dimensions. Obviously, it's ran on a public cloud. It's sort of Azure based. We deliver on top of Azure. We use all the Azure tooling and infrastructure and platform as a sort of multi-tenant solution. It's only delivered as a cloud multi-tenant solution. But it's also not just about the technology, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the design criteria and the benefits we try to deliver with this. And a lot of that has to do with flexibility, agility, and change management, and how the company can evolve, through this process, not just through sort of initial implementation, where you spend a lot of time thinking about what you want it to be, and you implement it, and it's a fit, and then sort of time goes by, and the company's needs change, and they acquire another company, or they merge with somebody, or they get attacked by their competitor, or the business models change, and so on. So some of these were the sort of big criteria for us. So let me talk about kind of what we did and how we're thinking about this, and what sort of the main thinking that went into this. So as we started thinking about what's next, and we spent a lot of time with customers thinking about their needs and talking to them about their needs, a few things emerged. One was, we want ERP, but we want more than ERP. It's very hard to impress people these days with general ledger or payables or receivables. This stuff's been around for a while. Functionality is a part for the course, but it's not something that necessarily is going to impress anybody, right? A lot of that is what it enables and how it's put together. And so the sort of three main things that emerged from this were productivity, velocity, and resilience. So in this day and age, they want to do more with less, they want to move fast, and they want to be resilient to change. As we get faced with pandemic and attacks of competition, and changes in the environment and regulatory regimes and all that kind of stuff, right? There needs to be a need for sort of flexibility and agility to sort of move with this, float with this, respond to this, and stay on the course. And so, with this in mind, we sort of set out to not just kind of rebuild the technology and foundation, but answer the questions around how we will deliver this productivity, velocity, and resilience to them. The history of the company. Obviously, all what we're doing is build sort of a foundation of being in this business for 40 years. So we didn't rebuild the whole thing from scratch. We took a lot of the sort of a functional footprint that we had and rethought it, for the future. And what allowed us to do this, it was this really sort of a major change in the technology, technology strategy. Again, as I'm thinking about this, I came from SuccessFactors, and I think about how those things were put together, say when SuccessFactors started Workday or Salesforce, whatever, that generation of SaaS providers, right? The technology landscape was just so different, between the cloud and containers and machine learning and, and the APIs and microservices. Those things kind of entered the mainstream of how enterprise apps are put together over the last, let's say, 5 years. things that were done 10, 15, 20 years ago, they're built in just a very, very, very different way. They're built, for the cloud also in delivered as software as a service, but built in sort of very different ways. So the toolbox from which we started re-architecting was very different from what it would have been, had we started, 10, 15 years earlier. So first of all, what is the product? Just as far as the footprint, as far as what we deliver to the customers now, what's ERPx? It's core financials, it's projects, it's procurement. It's on the left side, it's core HR and payroll. It's a little bit lighter weight, talent management, so performance engagement, and learning. And then on the right, it's FP&A, which essentially two things. It's sort of a general purpose modeling toolbox where you could model different things with, as well as sort of prepackaged applications for particular purposes, like integrated financial planning, which is it's already implemented there. And when we think about this, as I said, it's very, very difficult, I think, to sort of impress somebody with sort of a just functional footprint. This is very mature spaces, financials particularly, or even, project management. So for us, a lot of this was not about just what, but about how, how we deliver something out the box that fits the needs of specific businesses and allows them to ultimately, run better, and to connect to productivity, velocity, and resilience. And for us, really, it's a set of choices. We think of this as the set of choices. As you make the choices and you narrow your universe, you could focus on particular things at the expense of other things. So, we are focused on people-centric businesses, service-centric businesses, as opposed to product-centric businesses, that. So for sort of the four core industries for us is professional services, nonprofits, higher ed, and public sector. So we made our choice and decided that, we'll focus on the solution for these industries. We'll learn deeply about the needs of these industries. We'll build functionality for the industries, and I'll talk about other things, that we'll do for them. So another thing that goes back to our roots is understanding of the localizations and also local regimes, regulatory regimes, ways to do business, and understanding that, a public sector, municipality in Norway behaves differently from the UK, from the US, for instance, that even though they're all in sort of quote unquote the same industry, the way they work, the way they operate may differ quite a bit. And again, coming in my experience in the past from sort of a North American vendor that entered, other countries, what jumped at me really, really vividly from the very beginning was sort of the degree of depth to which, localizations are done here versus what I was used to. In the past, when you come from North America, you say, oh, let's just, we're going to translate everything and then we're going to do it for the UK, Germany, and France, and like, we're good to go, right? Whereas here, it's in Norway and Finland and Sweden and it's, Belgium and it's Holland and, and Spain and so on. So it's just much more granular, and, the system and the method and the process honed towards having sort of your ears to the ground in all these countries, understanding the needs, understanding sort of the regulatory stuff, for instance, compliance-oriented stuff, and so on, across the footprint of the apps that we provide. So this left column, so industry, localizations, processes that cut across, that's not new news with ERPx. These are the origins of the company. That's the strength that goes back to, to decades of the evolution of the company. Now, the middle column is something we've spent quite a bit of time with ERPx on and are continuously evolving. And that is sort of the main idea there is that as you pick the industries, you pick the users, of that work in those industries. And one sort of a big realization for us, or the change for us, was that in the past, we focused much more on professional users. So, finance users, for instance, right? People who sit in the software, all day, every day, and do work in AP or AR or whatever the case might be, right? And as you think about those users, they're usually, because they're professional users, they're typically much more comfortable with complexity. They understand the long forms, and they understand the codes, and they value efficiency above all, right? They find they could deal with complexity if they could be very efficient in the system. That's why often they develop almost like a muscle memory. They're going from a tab to tab to tab. They're very, very fast. They're fine with like a lot of stuff that does not look super user friendly, as long as it's very efficient, right? Now, on the other hand, when you think about other users in this industries, professional services, people on the, consultants on the road, or nonprofit folks out in the field helping their constituents and so on. The usage pattern is very, very different. And that's one of the things we've been rethinking with this. And the main objective, or the main things that we're trying to do, or we're doing actually with the ERPx, is pushing, application to the edge. Instead of asking user to come into the app and navigate, open the menu, navigate to whatever the screen, and understand the complexity of the screen, we take the application fragments essentially and push it to the edge, to them, to where they are. Whether it's sort of a notification driven thing where we call instant app, where on the fly, we create a very, very small app where we'll ask for your, input on this one specific field, and present you a little piece of information to make a decision on, without you having to ever go into the app. And typical experience, you go in the app and there's a big form where you don't actually need to worry about almost any of the fields except for one, right? We don't want to do that. We want to take this fragment and push it to you. We push it to you through the instant apps. We push it to you through digital assistant, for instance, as well, that through natural language interface delivered to you via, Teams, Slack, or Skype, whatever the messaging thing might be, right? Different ways to present, but the idea is the same. Take a small fragment, push to the edge to where the users are, get their input from them, and sort of move on.
You may find, as you're pushing to the edge, building functionality for the edge may also be very, very differentiated. I saw in the last year a lot of vertical edge applications, telemedicine, distance learning, a lot of e-commerce, a lot of warehouse automation, last mile delivery. Depending on the industry, a lot of, not something, they still need the general ledger, payables and all that, but they were pushing a lot more to the people in the field, right? So you may find building functionality into the edge will also help you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because what we find is that unless you do that, these users basically ignore the application, right? And they either don't submit the data, they delay, they wait till the end of the week, or I'm very used to that in the specific kind of a subdomain of HR. They push it on the HR and say, you do it for me. Here's they send in an email and say, you, Mr. Recruiter, you enter all this stuff for me. I don't want to get in your system. The system's too hard, right? And that you end up loading all this work back onto the HR, and they become less efficient. So that's this middle column about how we make it right for you because we understand the industry needs, we understand the country needs, we understand the experiential needs, and deliver experiences specific for these users and different experiences for different kinds of users. And all of this is enabled ultimately by this re-platforming that we've done, because the idea of making the thing right for you is not new. But it's always been very difficult to actually deliver this, because in the past, a lot of this, industry specific stuff, localization, spatial stuff had to be delivered through code, right? You had to write the code to express the differences between different industries, or this difference between different countries, or re-implement a lot of the experiential stuff, right? And what we built with this platform is essentially a way to deliver a lot of this, what I was talking about, through sort of a low-code, no-code tooling. And that's this extension integration kit, which is essentially sort of a low-code, no-code way of saying, I hear something that's happening in this module, right? I'm going to ask it an additional question if I need to. Then I'm going to take this information. I'm going to create perhaps either the digital assistant dialog or a small mini one-field mini app. I'm going to push this app to the user. I'm going to collect their feedback. I'm going to take this feedback and maybe write it into another module or reflect it into the ERP. And I could do all of this without having to write any code, just by sort of clicking and connecting and using, the application that allows me to link those things together. And that's
Dimitri, these mini apps, from a security perspective, they don't pose any more risk.
no risk, because they all run with user credentials. You still, as a user, you still need to, you still go through the same kind of a login or whatever. You need to have a credentials, session, whatever, process. So they all run with user credentials in the exact same way. There is no back door. It's still the front door from the security perspective. But the experiential side of it, again, instead of presenting you with a form with 50 fields of which you need to fill out once and the rest of them are grayed out or whatever, we just say, we only need one piece of input from you. We create this little on the fly thing and we say, Vinnie, input, yes or no here or additional information here. We just collect this, we're done, right? Those things are super lightweight and again, can be pushed to the edge, to deliver experience. And so the combination of this, industry, localization, unification of processes from financials to projects to HR to planning, this different experiences for different users delivered to the edge, connection between our modules. I'll talk about connections to the external modules as well, is what we think is going to deliver ultimately this sort of a right for your business system, and which is right for your business at the initial implementation and continuing to stay right with you as your needs change. So on the industry specific front, again, as I said, we focus on four industries primarily, and we do different things for these different industries. Sometimes it's just functionality kind of related stuff. So for professional services, a lot of this has to do with projects, project planning, project staffing, running the business of projects, utilization, productivity, tracking all this across, all the users. In other areas, it might be something different. It would be sort of debt recovery, for public sector, or dealing with sort of awards and grants for nonprofits. But it's not just functionality. As I said, so much of this has to do with the fit that we could deliver to them. In the past, again, as I said, it was basically a toolbox, right? You could do whatever you want to do, but you have to do it. What we did in the sort of current incarnation is we encapsulate a lot of this into this industry model. So, from chart of accounts, to workflows, to reports, to regulatory stuff, by country, all of this, all those hundreds or thousands, as I said, decisions sort of tweaked just the right way to reflect the needs of a particular customer, segment. And that already sort of reduced the cost of implementation for us just with the first generation of models by 30%. And this is kind of one big goal of mine, is to drive the implementation cost down and down and down and down as far as much as we possibly can, because, by providing sort of ways where the products out the box is more and more of a fit for the customers. And the kinds of things we will be doing there over time are much more sort of the kinds of things that typically done in consumer space, or, I had background in the past in QuickBooks, working in QuickBooks, some many years ago, where, when you don't have, professional services to help you, you figure out the ways to give tools to the customers themselves, to configure the product in sort of a small incremental ways. You find the ways to walk them through the wizards, to ask them business related information, versus sort of technical or IT type of information, and configure the app in the background. And another thing we're trying to do, which is sort of a common problem that we observe with systems, the enterprise systems, is that often customers go through the implementation and they're done. And then the sort of a time goes by, as I said, their needs change, but also our software changes. It's been always a little bit of a challenge to have customers sort of uptake the new features at the exact same pace once they're done with the implementation. So that's one of the things, this continuous micro configuration is something